Grab a pen and paper, because this is your definitive guide to a career in law. Hi, and welcome to the Law Simplified. I'm Shaveen Bandad-Nayakar. Oftentimes, I am told by my fast track and masterclass students that had they known of what they were getting themselves into, or exactly what they should have or ought to have looked at prior to entering or considering a career in law, they would have done far much better, so to speak, than where they were at the time that we started sessions. Contrary to popular belief, when it comes to the profession of law, the career prospects and what you can achieve in the long term might be vastly different to what is advertised by universities, institutions, or for that matter, what's told to you by those who have traversed a similar path. This video is going to be slightly different from the usual affair that you'd see on the Law Simplified platform. Throughout this past several years, I've either made content on this platform which tries to drill deeper into one particular niche or area in terms of how to ace your law exam, or on the other hand, what techniques as well as skills that you need to inculcate to try and progress and elevate your standards in terms of your career. But at no point would you have seen either on this particular YouTube channel or the different platforms that the Law Simplified is disseminated on a complete guide to what you as a potential law student or someone that has aspirations of entering into the profession might have to do to carve out your own unique path in law. Now, for ease of reference, this video, as long as it may be, is broken into three major components: academics, career, and future. You might be someone who's watching this video being essentially in one of these three buckets, or someone who hasn't even started their trajectory or their career pathway at all. Someone who's just out of school, perhaps thinking about getting into the legal profession. Whoever you might be, there would be a technique or there would be a skill that you need to hone that I'm going to talk about. And for ease of reference, I'll break down the chapters in the description below. If you like the type of content that I make, as well as want to see this in a more broader format, and want to reach out as well, make sure you leave a comment below and do give a like and a subscribe to the Law Simplified channel. Now, let's begin with academics. Depending on your current skill set, your current understanding and knowledge of perhaps in the law, or your passion and interest in the law, there are multiple pathways to enter into the academia or the academic component of a law degree. Now, if you are someone who's just completed school, if you're someone who's just completed your primary and secondary education, from a university standpoint, I would highly recommend getting into a degree. So a degree or a Bachelor of Laws or an LLB is essentially the most sought after qualification when it comes to law at the initial stages. What I mean by this is when it comes to law, it's important to have an understanding of the fundamentals. And if you look at the different videos on this channel, you'd notice that it ranges from direct or straightforward subjects like criminal law, contract law, constitutional law, public law, and the English legal system, to more nuanced and specific areas such as tort law, jurisprudence, commercial law, and company law. Later on in your academics, when you progress through it and get onto your LLM, your master's in law, the PhD, for example, you'll be focusing or honing in on specific nuanced niche areas. But as a starting point, if you are a student who's just coming out of your secondary education and you're interested in pursuing a career in law, the starting point essentially should be an LLB or a law degree, a Bachelor of Laws. On the other hand, you might be someone who is already working in an industry separate or different to that of law. and perhaps there are one or two areas that might be linked to law that has piqued your interest. Oftentimes, I've had students who are in finance, marketing, or management that might have had to deal with contracts, for instance, mergers or acquisitions, some sort of share transaction here or there, and become fascinated by the legal process. I've been once told by a fast track student that she was fascinated by the manner in which the solicitor or those who are employed in the firm that the company was working with would operate and how they articulate their ideas and their thoughts. This brings about the very interesting aspect that you might be a person who is not really trying to get into the profession at all, but simply wanting to learn. If you're either one of these, essentially someone who is in a mid-career situation or in another profession wanting to pivot into law, or someone who just wants to understand the law in general, I would recommend a graduate diploma in law, or a GDL. You can think of a GDL as a fast-track method of completing your law degree. Essentially, it has the same set of subjects, at least fundamentally, that a Bachelor of Laws or an LLB program would have, but the time frame that's required to complete it would not be 2 or 3 years. It most likely would be a year, or essentially 18 months or so. Depending on the different programs out there, you should consider whether it needs to be completed part-time or full-time. Sometimes there are GDL programs that are completely online, as are LLB programs, mind you. But a GDL is what you need to look at if you are considering a pivot in terms of your career, or simply want to have a broader understanding and an appreciation of the law. Right. So the primary modes by which you could enter into academics in terms of law would then be the Bachelor of Laws on the one hand, and then the GDL if you're someone who's a mid-tier career professional who's trying to pivot into law. Oftentimes, most of my fast track and masterclass students fall into this second category, primarily because law does provide for them an opportunity to start afresh on the one hand, but also broaden the horizon in terms of career prospects. Because unlike most other specialized areas, such as engineering or medicine for that matter, when it comes to law, the opportunities are relatively endless into what areas that you can go into. I've often said on this very YouTube channel, as well as the different platforms the Law Simplified is disseminated on, that law is much more about how you think than what you know. And from a career standpoint, organizations employ those who have a unique perspective on the world and circumstances. Lawyers, barristers, and solicitors at the end of the day are problem solvers. They are able to apply the law and a method of thinking that may not be something general or available to someone from another profession or another qualification. Law is many shades of gray as opposed to being black or white. Okay, now this is what you would need to think of if you are thinking of going into academics. Now, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, depending on what other unique interests that you have, the qualification, the LLB or the GDL, depending on the universities and institutions that are available to you, will differ vastly from one to the other. That is a conversation for another day altogether. And if you are interested in discussing which university or institution best fits your needs, I'd highly recommend getting in touch through the link in the description below. And I'd be happy to set up a one-on-one consultation to figure out which qualification best suits your unique circumstances. The second part of this is career. Now that you have your qualification out of the way, so to speak, now that you have achieved hopefully a 2-1 or a first class in your law degree, or similar or equivalent in your GDL, your graduate diploma in law, it's about getting into the actual profession. Now, interestingly, the profession itself is not all about being on your feet as a barrister or behind a desk or as a firm-based solicitor in England and Wales or any other part of the world. There are more opportunities for you, for example, if you have unique interests that go beyond just the law. Now, on a number of occasions on this YouTube channel, I've mentioned different pathways that you could take, including academia, including actually going into teaching or lecturing for different subjects in law, as well as opting in for the judicial path, becoming a judge, so to speak, or entering the judiciary in general. But from a career standpoint, this too depends on where you currently are at. So on the one hand, if you have taken the traditional route of completing your primary and secondary education, gone on to do an LLB, you need to ask yourself whether you are intending to practice. This will stem from how you had an interest or how you generated an interest in law in the first place. Was it by seeing a few famous television shows? Was it by going to court and actually seeing barristers on their feet? Or was it simply based on a more monetary, consideration-based motivation, so to speak? Was it the fact that you wanted to earn a lot of money? In either context, whether it be the fact that you want to practice, you want to teach, or you want to adjudicate, think about the relevant qualification for that in advance. Now, I know that we looked at the LLB and the GDL programs, but there are LLB and GDL programs which are relatively generic that doesn't really offer you the unique skill set necessary for one particular career pathway. So I always recommend to my own masterclass and fast track students to work backwards. Think deeply about what you want to do after you complete your degree, and then try and determine the degree or the qualification that matches that. Be as unique and specialized as you can from the very get-go, because you might not have an opportunity to immediately do the next level of your academics. In other words, your master's or your PhD or any other postdoctoral for that matter. What you will understand from a practical standpoint, from a professional career standpoint, that academic qualifications beyond an LLM might not necessarily be what an employer would be looking for. This then nicely segues into the next part about the career that we need to talk about, is whether you want to go it on your own. What I mean by this is there are certain types of students who've always wanted to have their own individual sole proprietorship, so to speak, and want to go about something that's unique to them. To give you an example, the Law Simplified platform and what I do on a day-to-day basis is completely different to what most others would do with their law degree, with the qualification that they've achieved. I personally love teaching, and I love the nuances of the law. And teaching 22 modules of English law, and as recently as 3 months ago for the Canadian and Australian jurisdictions as well, has stimulated my thinking to such an extent that I enjoy what I do. So you too might not want to take the generic route, so to speak, and you might want to apply your learning in a vastly different way, especially if you are someone who is in another career pathway altogether. You're doing another profession. You might be able to utilize what you've learned to enrich and elevate your current profession and provide a value addition to your employer as well. Which leads us to the third part of this discussion, your future. Now, most often than not, students think of a career and then end it at that. But in reality, if you traverse the different videos that I have released on this YouTube channel, you'll notice that apart from completing a career and then going off into the middle distance of retirement, you might actually be able to elevate your professional career prospects and what you have achieved in that period of time in the profession, not just in law, but having used law in another profession as well, to create a pathway for yourself as an industry expert later on. This might be in the form of becoming a consultant, an arbitrator, a mediator, or for those who traverse the general legal pathway as a practitioner, as a solicitor or a barrister, you could end up in the judiciary as well, as a judge. Now, this is very abstract, and I understand that from this particular standpoint, but you need to understand that the profession of law is so unique in the way in which it can be wielded and used by people that it's not very easy to tell you one direct pathway to take. It's not like medicine, it might not be like architecture or engineering. Law is so subjective that depending on your own unique perspectives and your own personality, you might take very different pathways to your colleague or your family. Now, this video, this definitive guide essentially was intended to stimulate your thinking and to motivate you to research more on what your academics are going to look like, what your career pathway may be, and what your future prospects are. But if you'd like to learn more about how you can utilize your skill set and your knowledge to better yourself in this profession and move forward in a lucrative manner, I'd highly recommend having a look at the other videos on the career guidance playlist on this channel, as well as the how to ace a law exam. And if you feel like you need more support, do reach out through the links in the description below, and I'd be happy to help. But until the next time that we meet, have fun, stay safe, and as always, obey the law.